Thomas Inglesby, the pen name of the 19th century author and rector of St Dunstan, Snargate, in the Inglesby Legends wrote that the world, according to the best geographers, is divided into Europe, Asia, Africa, America and Romney Marsh. Although this may be disputed as not being entirely factual, it is beyond dispute that this area of roughly 100 square miles is rightly famed for a variety of special characteristics which give it a unique identity. The name of Romney Marsh has been made famous throughout the world by the indigenous breed of sheep that bears that name. Even in this secular age, many of the outstanding glories of Romney Marsh are the historic churches which grace its landscape. These vary from small country churches like St Thomas's to larger town churches like All Saints' Church, the so-called Cathedral on the Marsh, but collectively they imbue the atmosphere of Romney Marsh with a sense of history, continuity, heritage, spirituality and timelessness. The low-lying marshland of Romney Marsh would seem to be an unlikely and unpromising place in which to build the unique and historic churches which have survived to the present day. All Saints' Church in Lydd, for example, has its origins in a Romano-British basilica built in the 5th century on what was a sand and shingle bank in a tidal lagoon. Despite this unpromising start, it has grown to become the church with the longest nave in Kent, excepting Canterbury Cathedral, and also a church with one of the tallest towers at 40 metres. The questions which drive this film are firstly, why does a small settlement like Lydd come to have such a large and impressive church as the Cathedral on the Marsh, where the burial of prestigious and historic figures like Thomas Edgar have taken place? Secondly, can both the headstone of Thomas Edgar and the plot where he was laid to rest be identified with certainty? Thirdly, the film seeks to engage with the debate as to what should be done for the best to safeguard headstone inscriptions which are being effaced by physical agents of weathering, including wind, acid, rain and ice, or by biological agents of weathering such as moss and lichens. My main method of gaining answers for my quest was to ask questions, and who better to ask than Reverend Christopher MacLean, the vicar of all 14 churches on the Marsh, including All Saints in Lydd.
Reverend Chris MacLean, thank you so much for agreeing to this interview and for signing the forms. I wanted to ask you a little series of questions about the church here. Firstly, is the phrase "the Cathedral on the Marsh" in general use in the area?
I think it's a title this church takes very seriously, and it's certainly very coveted. Ivy Church, a church near here, which is very large, also aspires to be the Cathedral of the Romney Marsh. And to some degree it's about size, but this church is considered a cathedral also because unusually it has 2 west doors next to each other. There are only 6 parish churches in the country that have double west doors like we do, and so those are more characteristically found in cathedrals. So for parish churches it's very unusual. The nearest one to us like this is in Tenterton.
Thank you very much. That's a very detailed and informative answer. Do you think the churches on the Romney Marsh share a special bond by being on the marsh?
The churches are all quite distinctive because they grew up in a tradition of a very wealthy wool market, and so they grew up in communities, and they're quite impressive structures. Most of them are quite large, in places where you wouldn't think a big church would exist. So they're quite distinctive in that sense. And they're all linked, as we all are across the marsh, by a common bond of living in a flat agricultural area. That 14 churches of the Romney Marsh are all part of one single benefice together.
And you were telling me earlier that you're the vicar of a number of the churches.
That's right, 14 churches here, yeah.
It's almost unbelievable, I think. Well done.
Thank you.
And with your holidays coming up, you more than deserve them.
Oh, well, it's fun doing this.
On a 5-point scale, with 5 being the highest, how important do you think All Saints Church and Graveyard is?
The churchyard here has been closed now for 140 years. No one's been buried here since, but it's a great source of historical record. This place, this churchyard, has served the community both in the town of Lydd and in the surrounding villages which form this parish. Most significantly, the area of coastline from Dungeness up to Greatstone was a place where there were many shipwrecks, and so there are many shipping tragedies that are buried here, ships and small boats and lives lost at sea, that are recorded in stones all around the place. We have an anniversary coming up next year of the sinking of the North Fleet, a ship that was taking migrants to go and live in Tasmania. They got as far as Dungeness, and then their ship was sank by a Spanish ship, and almost 300 people died that one night, and the bodies must have been scattered all along this coastline, and we've got a number buried here, and it's interesting trying to research where these graves are.
Again, a very excellent answer, thank you. Continuing the theme of mariners being laid to rest in the churchyard here, one famous mariner, Thomas Edgar, who sailed with Captain Cook on his 3rd voyage, is buried here, and you've been showing me and Andrew the actual headstone, which is cracked and weathered and has been taken into the church for safekeeping. Could you tell me a little more of that, please?
Well, Thomas Edgar is one of a number of figures here of famous people or people associated with famous events who are buried in the churchyard, and his grave is presumably on the other side of the church from here, but it's and we think we know the location of it, but the headstone has been broken and placed in the church for safekeeping for a number of decades. From a point of view of tourists and historians and people who are concerned about this thing, this is a great symbol of the great past of British maritime history.
On that note, Reverend Chris MacLean, I thank you very much for those excellent answers.
My pleasure.
They're very explicit.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Christopher Aubrey, the church warden, kindly showed me his map that he had been working on for the last 2.5 years. Thomas Edgar's burial plot was marked on it. We then went into the churchyard to locate its position. In summary of my request for answers, I established that All Saints Church grew to a great size due to the wealth of the area in the Middle Ages, and at the time when Lydd was allied to the Cinque Ports with their protected trading arrangements. The headstone of Thomas Edgar lies in plain sight within All Saints Church, but the original plot where he was laid to rest is more difficult to find. With the help from Christopher Aubrey and his map, however, I was able to find and identify the plot where Thomas Edgar had been laid to rest, and indeed where he continues to rest. Finally, the debate about what should be done for the best about weathering headstones was not fully resolved, and it remains an open question where people have different views.